Identity is part of the essence of being human. The process of thinking about who we are and who we want to become is one of the fundamental questions that we need to investigate over and over again over the course of our lifetime. And helping students to begin thinking through those questions and being more reflexive about their choices, about who you are as opposed to who your parents think you are or who your parents want you to be, maybe even who you want to be versus who you are, that those are the kinds of things that we can spend semesters, years, really delving into in an introspective sort of way. And one of the aims of this cluster is to help students begin thinking about those things. Who am I? Who do I want to be? And how do I become this vision of myself that I have?
I really tried to bring a historical perspective to identity and to try to contextualize identity. So how does identity emerge and change over time, over space, and over place? How are past identities informed by present ones? How are present identities informed and built on identities that existed in the past? And we also look a lot in my classes about how identity is manifested and how we can find identities of individuals and groups and communities that no longer exist, and trying to understand what sources and evidence we can use towards that end. So how do we find out what people thought of themselves when they were living in the 16th century or when they were living in the 15th century? What sources can we look for identity within? And so we look at printed sources and how those can be manifestations of identity. We look at art, we look at images, look at architecture, and how all of that tells us about identities in the past. Because these two things are very clearly linked. In order to understand our current identities and where we come from, they need to be placed in a historical context.
So in costume design, we take very stereotypical kinds of ideas about identity, and we spend time working with the students to figure out ways that we can communicate those in order to help you understand, when you go to the theater, some of the things that have already happened before the play begins. From a performative standpoint, and as a costume designer, we look at the ways that we communicate our identity through the way that we dress on a regular basis, and that can be not only to create a group, but also to isolate ourselves. It may be to camouflage or confuse. There's lots of different reasons that we might dress a certain way to put on a certain persona or join a certain group or be affiliated with a certain group in order to continue to survive and thrive in our culture.
And another way students can investigate identity is through the makeup design class.
I think that you can make yourself whoever you want to be with makeup. You can stay true to yourself or invent a new identity depending on what makeup you wear that day.
Makeup can cause a lot of judgments by how you wear your makeup, and people can definitely pinpoint you as a certain type of person by how much makeup you wear and what makeup you wear. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, but it's definitely something that's true.
Acting is all about creating a new identity. Well, you're asking students to do a lot of different things. You're asking them to create physical characters so that they're reconfiguring their bodies in a way to create a new character. They sometimes have to work with their voices to create a new character. They have to start thinking about the thinking processes of a character. So they have to do something called backstory. So they have to really know and imagine and make up the character's life, the things that they don't know from the script, from the given circumstances of the script. So they really have to create a whole new identity for themselves.
I've been doing the International Identity Project for many years, long before we had Paideia. The point of it is to study other cultures and study the way other people think of drawing. It's also important for us to think more globally about the way others think of drawing on their bodies and in different ways.
I think identity is one of those terms that everybody thinks they know what it means, and as soon as you try to define it precisely, it turns as slippery as an eel on you. It's one of those great concepts that the more you study it, the more you realize you don't know anything about it. So in sociology, we're very interested in patterns of behavior. And what I think taking a sociology class will do for the students in the investigating identity cluster is that it will help them see that that individual thing they do, everybody else who shares that identity does it too.
Identity is incredibly important to young people. I mean, they come here fresh out of high school, they don't know that much about identity. And so to investigate identity, I think, is an incredibly personal journey for them throughout their 4 years. And so I think that being part of a cluster that's called Investigating Identity could be really personally enlightening to them, in the sense of figuring out that age-old question of who am I?